June for inviting me to come and speak to you briefly for an hour. Firstly, as you can hear, I talk different from everybody else. So if you don't understand me, please feel free to butt in, to ask questions, to repeat. It's going to be a very flexible meeting, and what I've got to obviously go through this afternoon, this evening for you. First of all, I'd like to tell you that this is the first time that I've ever done something like this, so today I'm feeling a little bit old, because when you start going through history of your own place, of your own country, when you don't live in it, that's when it really drums into you just exactly, how time has passed. From some people I'm still a young pup, but talking about history has definitely made me feel a little bit older. So again, my name's Sean Meloy. I was born in a little town in Scotland called Kilmarnock. I'll give you a quick look at the map in a second. And I spent most of my youth in Scotland, and I moved to England when I was 35. Which good experience moving to England. As you know, the Scottish and the English, we have our history. It's always been, and really to this day, we still have the history, obviously, with England. There's always going to be, when people say to me, Sean Meloy, that's not Scottish. Well, it's not. Obviously, Sean Meloy is from Ireland. My father's side were all from Ireland. And again, we'll go into the history of what makes us move, over to Scotland. But the good thing onto my mother's side's a Wallace. So my mother was Wallace, which gives you a great subject to talk about. We could just sit and talk about Braveheart, the movie, all night. Braveheart, the movie, who was the Australian actor, and it was mostly set in Ireland. So, there was, the movies come to play in that. But wherever you go in the world, you always know, it doesn't matter where you are, you'll always find somebody who has watched the movie Braveheart. And do you know that? Do you know that person? I remember getting a speeding ticket down in Mexico, and I pulled out my license, and the officer looked and went, "Wallace? Like William Wallace? Like Corazon Valiente?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "I love that movie. Go on." So, for the chances of not getting a speeding ticket for a movie, I'm quite happy to have seen that one. So again, I spent most of my life in Scotland, moved down to England. I took a little bit of time in Germany. I also went to Korea. And then, for the largest part of time, I lived in Mexico. So I lived in Mexico for 10 years in Torreon and Coahuila, where I met my wife, which is, that's a few things you can get from Mexico. One's tequila and the other one's normally a wife, so it goes hand in hand. But the great thing about being Scottish, there's a few parts in the hot history that we're going to in, is one of the things that stands out in my life is a saying, and it's my grandmother always said it, and it's, "We're all Job Tamson's bairns," which means we're all God's children, okay? So for me, it doesn't matter where you're from, we're all bleed the same, and we're all God's children, So it doesn't matter, again, from that side of here, on the border, with too many things going on today that split us all apart, and the one thing that brings us all back together is humanity and love. So again, I love that saying, "We're all Job Tamson's bairns." So let's move on with the slideshow. And it's a short history in the life, really, about the town of Kilmarnock. And then, again, I've got a few pages which are not really mine, but the Scottish Texan side of things, and why the Scots would be here. So again, the map's a very old map. It might not be the easiest to see, but the little square shows you whereabouts Kilmarnock sits in the map of Great Britain. Obviously, the beautiful island of Ireland over onto the left-hand side there. The larger greyer piece down at the bottom, as I've spoke about, we'll not say any more about, that's England. You know, there's a border should be drawn across there. But again, down round about this part of the map, there's a historic wall runs across from both sides. That's Hadrian's Wall. Now, Hadrian's Wall was built by the Romans, and the Romans built that to keep the Scottish people in, not to keep us out. It was to keep us in there because they didn't want us down anywhere near the English because we were thought of being too savage. You know, the men with the blue faces, the Picts and the Celts, known for their barbarism. So again, Hadrian's Wall was built across there to keep us in, and really Scotland has divided into the Highlands and the Lowlands. So you would have, really, when it's very difficult for my American friends when I discuss to them, they're like, well, how big is Scotland? And I know that their ancestry, they always ask me, you know, do you know my Uncle James from Paisley? And I'm saying, well, it's slightly bigger than that, but not that much bigger, because this part of Scotland here, from the Clyde, back over here to the Tay in Edinburgh, you can drive in 1.5 hours. So there's a large motorway runs across there. Now, from here, from my house to London, you could drive that in 8 hours. You wouldn't really particularly want to, but, you know, people in Texas go further to the store to get something that they've forgotten in a day. But remember, this country here, as Great Britain, we used to own 3/4 of the world. You know, I know that's a bit of a, you know, from here as well, we'll give you that one back, but 3/4 of the world, and the majority of it owned by Queen Victoria under her reign. It's absolutely immense when you think of that, when you look at the size of the island there. You know, I firmly believe in everything turning round, and it has done. I mean, the likes of the Empire of India and the Empire of Hong Kong has come back, and Australia. It's all still the Commonwealth, but now kind of no longer belongs to the Queen. Just such amazing points. And that leads me right into a specific war that sticks in every Scotsman's throat. You know, the last battle in the 1700s at Culloden. And if Scotland had won that war, then you ask yourself how much of the world would actually have been ruled by, there wouldn't have been a Great Britain, it's who would it have been ruled by in that side? What would have been different? And to me, that is just absolutely awe-inspiring, the fact that had we won that war. Now, I'm sure it would have probably been for the worse, you know, all the Scotsmen getting out there celebrating and, you know, drinking, but you just don't know. But, so, from that side of things, the one thing that always has been in my heart as a Scotsman is, you talk about slavery and people think of slavery from the African side to the Americas, etc. But Scots were always slaves. We were always slaves to our clan masters. So you were either, it's not as if you could say, okay, you're part of the MacLeods. You couldn't just go, you know, I'm leaving my clan today, guys, I'm going to go and join this other clan. That just wasn't possible, because remember, you were normally fighting with all of your neighbours. So there's no way out of your territory or your area, so you were a slave to your clan master. So then come along the English, they win the war, and now the Scots are really slaves to the English. So the reason that I touch on this point, and I hope I'm not going off on a tangent to it, but you've got to ask yourself, why would the Scots emigrate to anywhere? Why would they leave this beautiful island that all the Americans now want to go to and see, or people from all about the world, to Japan, and just to come and see this? And the real reason is absolute need and want, either for starvation or the want to better yourself or to get a better life. Now, that's pretty clear because, you asked me why am I here. I came up from Mexico, I had a business in Mexico, it was rather dangerous down there, so I brought it to the United States, to be successful. We had a successful UK business, and we brought that business over, but it was from a size point of view, the ability to, the dream world or the dreamland. That's why they came to the Americas. But remember, coming to the Americas, for me, I get on a plane in Glasgow. It takes me 6 or 7 hours, depending how the wind's blowing, and I'm in New York. From New York, it's 4 hours, I'm in San Antonio, or I can go to Houston and then come in. So I've got about a day of traveling. Now, back in the day of our ancestors coming over here, I mean, you're talking, it was 3 months, 2.5 to 3 months on a boat that was known that if you hit the doldrums in the middle of the sea, the chances are you weren't going to get to the other land. So the choice of paying for a ticket, and the chances were, I don't know what the percentage chance was, but there must have been something really bad to make you go on this boat or to put you on this boat, or really just a dream of better things. So the land clearances of the 1700s, where the lords of England would take people off their land, and legally they were allowed to do that because they were running sheep. So basically because they had more sheep in one area, they could take your land and run sheep on it, which would literally starve the owners out. And these people had usually worked for, other lords or ladies, and it's such a very difficult life, because as we've said there in this river which runs from side to side, we have a population, I think, around about 6 million now, okay? Now you put that into perspective of Mexico City. There's more people live in one street in Mexico City than what there is in Scotland. You're talking literally 35, 36 million on the full side of that city. So most of them live really in 2 cities, and that's Edinburgh and Glasgow. Once you pass that, that's when you really get into the Highlands, where it's very hard living. It's the weather up there in the winter can be particularly bad. The past 2 years, thanks to global warming, the people of Scotland have seen summer. This year, summer's meant to be on a Thursday. We don't know when, but it's definitely going to be on a Thursday this year. So, again, moving up into the Highlands, the 2 cities hold most of the people, and the town of Kilmarnock really is over on this west coast. In a good day, you can see Ireland across. So it's about 2 hours on the ferry from Stranraer over to Northern Ireland, over to Belfast. And if you think about the west coast of Scotland and Glasgow, I'll talk about, just as I see the map, I'll talk about the bigger cities. One of the things that surprised me growing up was Glasgow, the city of Glasgow, was actually built on finance from the tobacco trade. Okay? Now, that for me was strange, because where was this tobacco going? This tobacco was going, as Glasgow was one of the last ports, they would sail from Glasgow, and this is the place up in the Orkneys or the Shetlands where they would take on the last water. Now, in there, there's some of the bars, you see some of the old bar cantinas with the bar and the trap door at the bar, where they say that people would get drunk, and all of a sudden the trap door would go on, and you would waken up, sobering up on a boat to the US. So it's these are the type of things when you read into it, you're thinking this was quite a barbaric place. But again, the last place where they'd take on water before they would sail across. But Glasgow was built on that trade, and these were the last ports of the Hudson Bay Company, really. So you would have the English version of the Hudson Bay Company, who would be coming over, sailing over to trade with the Indians. And again, the credit side of things for the Indians is the Indians liked Brazilian tobacco. So there was already trade between this, where they would rather have tobacco from one side and another side, and this was where I first came across the system of credit as well, because the Indians were honest people. They would not have a to go and get more beaver. But what happened in that situation is they would give them the gun and say, next season we're coming back here and you need to give us 60 beaver pelts. What that did is that gave the Indian what it wanted, but it kept them trading with the Hudson Bay Company rather than with the French. So you kept this trade going all the way through. But for me, you know, some of the beautiful architecture in Glasgow, the Rennie Mackintosh museums, and some of the actual big buildings over there, it was really all built on tobacco money, which was very interesting to me. Again, you've got the Adams family from not the Adams family from over here with the Bogs, etc., but John Adams and his father as well, giving you the economy system built on the system of capitalism, which was seen when these tobacco merchants had a lot of money. They would then let that money filter down, and everybody all the way down to the lowest people would profit from the fact that these people had money. Where it goes wrong nowadays is the money flows down, but they want to own every single part of it all the way down. So that's where capitalism, but we won't get into that side of the politics. Let me jump from Glasgow back down 30 miles to the south, and we're going to go to my town of Kilmarnock. Now, I would like to see that this is my mother and father's home, but it's not. This is not our home. This is the Dean Castle in Kilmarnock. So, the town of Kilmarnock itself was really meaning the Church of Marnock, okay? So, that's from the Scottish Gaelic. It's a large borough section, and the Kilmarnock water passes through it, giving rise to the same name of Bank Street. So the two banks of the rivers meet. The first collection of works by the Scottish poet Robert Burns was printed in Kilmarnock. So we'll go on to a bit more of Burns going forward. Again, probably the most well-known historic figure from Scotland being the poet Robert Burns. I remember walking one day through Central Park, the city's 100-year anniversary, and they were like, what about your city? And I was like, well, you know, the 1300s, that's how far the history can go back. It was originally owned by the Boyd family. It has a strong historical connection with many people and events famous in Scottish history. Robert the Bruce, who gave the Boyds, actually gave that to the lands. James III of Scotland, whose sister was married a Boyd, and the Covenanters, some of whom were imprisoned here. Bonnie Prince Charlie, whose rebellion was joined by the 4th Earl of Kilmarnock, and obviously Robert Burns, who we've covered. The keep, this area here, was built around 1350 by Sir Robert Boyd, who was the son of Sir Thomas Boyd. It was built mainly for defence. The walls are 2 to 3 metres thick. So that tells you exactly what they were looking. They didn't want anybody in there. And one of the surprising things here is there's no arrow slits in it for defending. So there's no slits in there for arrows for defence. All of the defence was done from the battlements up at the top. So again, looking at that, I mean, I don't know the actual size and dimensions, but it's going to be quite small in there if you've got 2 or 3 metre thick walls. The palace itself, this palace section here, was built around the mid-1300s by Sir Robert Boyd and his son. The lands were given to him, to Sir Robert Boyd, for his loyal service in the Scottish War of Independence. In 1735, an accidental fire started in the kitchen of the palace. This the palace was a complete ruin, and after this it took almost 2 centuries of neglect. Although some of the building was remained in use, the resident of the castle, William Boyd, the 4th Earl of Kilmarnock, had financial problems and could not repair the castle itself. So really quickly, the castle was sold by James Boyd in 1746, and the estate changed hands many times. When the 8th Lord Howard de Walden inherited the castle, he began its restoration, and he completed the work in 1908. That shows you how long it took to bring it back together. The complete restoration of the palace finished in 1946. So that really is just, the castle, which was my childhood play area. My house is literally half a mile up the road, and for us, playing in the castle grounds, and bad to say now, but we had to take the odd pheasant or two that was, these things happen, but I won't be classed as a poacher until the end of this, okay? So that tells you a little bit about the Dean Castle. Not the biggest of castles, but before we go, this is a plaque that was placed in the Dean Castle. It was dedicated to the victims of the terrorism in the US on the 11th of September 2001. So again, it's a quote from Mr. Robert Burns. "Man's inhumanity to man makes countless thousands mourn." Okay, so it just shows you that that was a global incident, and we were thinking about you over there in Scotland. Now, I didn't show you my family house, but when we're going on to family houses, I just thought I would show you this one here. This is another little castle, which obviously isn't a family house, but this is Culzean Castle. As again, everybody spells it wrong or gets it wrong. Culzean, but it's actually Culzean Castle. Does anybody know who owned this? No. This one was owned by somebody almost important, just important.
You too.
No, almost. This piece of work here was owned by the Kennedy family. Okay. Now, after I get back into that, this is slightly further down. If you looked on the west coast down there, it's slightly further down right on the castle. So here is the front with the gardens. At the back of this, it looks right over the sea over to Ireland and to the Isles of Craig. Now the Isles of Craig is a large volcanic plug that sits right in the middle of the ocean. I should have got a picture of it. But that's where they make all of the world's curling stones. It's a granite plug which sits in there, and it's got the exact structure to make the curling stones. So again, just a little bit of history. It's not inhabited, it's got a bird colony there, and they can take a certain amount of rock out per year. So, Culzean Castle is a castle overlooking the Firth of Clyde near Maple Carrick on the Ayrshire coast of Scotland. It is the former home of the Marquess of Ailsa, the chief of the Clan Kennedy, but it's now owned by the National Trust for Scotland. The Clifftop Castle lies with the Culzean Castle Country Park and is open to the public since 1972. And until recently, an illustration of the castle has featured on the reverse side of the £5 note on Scotland. So, Culzean Castle was constructed as an Elm Plan castle by order of the 10th Earl of Cassilis. He instructed the architect Robert Adam to rebuild a previous but more basic structure into a fine country house to be the seat of his earldom. The castle was built in stages between 1777 and 1792. It incorporates a large drum tower and with a circular saloon inside which overlooks the sea, a grand oval staircase and a suite of well-appointed apartments. In 1945, the Kennedy family gave the castle and its ground to the National Trust for Scotland, thus avoiding inheritance tax. Okay? It wasn't given as, here you go, it was because it was going to cost a lot. In doing so, they stipulated that the apartment at the top of the castle be given to General of the Army, Dwight D. Eisenhower. So, in recognition of his role as Supreme Commander of the Allied forces in Europe during the Second World War, The General visited Culzean Castle in 1946 and stayed there 4 times, including once while President of the United States. So, again, if you can get good with the Kennedy family, you get your own little room in the top of a castle. That's what we're striving for.
You're right.
The castle is reputed to be home to at least 7 ghosts, including a piper and a servant girl. So every castle's got to have its ghost, but you know, a servant girl and a piper, I think that's pretty good going. So, on to other people's houses. Do you know whose house this is?
Jack Nicklaus's.
No. Close.
Good guess.
This is owned by Mr. Donald Trump. There you go. This is Turnberry, one of the most exclusive golf courses in Scotland. It's about 20 miles down from the castle, and again it's owned by the Trump Empire, running out about $6 million in losses at the moment, but hey, you know, these things is like inheritance tax. You need to lose a bit somewhere. So I thought I'd pipe that in. Again, just a little bit about this. I'm not exactly sure who built it, but it was built because they started a railway from Glasgow down the west coast and all the way to the boat that went over to Ireland. So it was built, and as you can see, it was built by the same person, the architect, who built the station, the rail station. And you can see it is very, very similar to an old kind of station. It was used during the war as a hospital for people who obviously had been injured. And there's a very large landing strip there, right in the front. It's obviously into the golf course now. You can just see it, but a landing strip in front of there. So again, Scotland being very famous for golf, all the way down that west coast. There is Royal Troon golf course, there's Brassey, there's, you know, the chances of you being able to play them are slim, but as a child we used to pick up all the golf balls all the way down the sea and then sell them back. So, you know, there was an entrepreneurship right from the start. So again, I've come away all the way down the west coast, and now we're going to jump back up into Scotland. Now I thought this was going to be difficult, and I'm not even halfway there and we're already 30 minutes in, so let's start going. The town of Kilmarnock itself, one of the famous places in Scotland, or the economic side of businesses, a company called Andrew Barclay. Andrew Barclay made really steam trains, steam operations, started off by making steam engines for the mining industry, you know, to give them the ability to come up and down the mines. So born in 1840, Andrew Barclay was only 25 years of age when he set up a partnership with Thomas McCulloch to manufacture mill shafts in Kilmarnock. It was only a couple of years later that he branched out on his own to manufacture his patent gas lamps. In 1847, he set up shops specialising in the manufacture of winding engines for the local coal mining industry. However, the money from the gas lamp patent sale never paid, and sequestration of the company came the following year. By 1859, Barclay recovered from his setback, and his new former company produced its locomotive sometimes around 1871. Andrew Barclay set up a second locomotive building inside. So again, the entrepreneurship of engineering in Scotland. This company's still not as under Barclay. It went to Hunslet and Barclay. It's now owned by a big conglomerate called Wabco. Okay, so again, just a little bit. The famous Kilmarnock tipple. Johnny Walker's was originally from Kilmarnock. Literally, you could see it from my house, you could smell it from my house, and a huge portion of the population worked in Johnny Walker's. 2012, I mean, a very big, problem when that place closed down. It's now owned by a large company called Diageo. Diageo own Johnny Walker's, they own the tequila companies, they own Fort Smirnoff. They're just a huge big conglomerate. But what they couldn't see was the fact that they could make it with robots or bottle it with robots, cheaper just up the road. So they closed it down. About 2,000 people lost their jobs. And I'm not a whiskey drinker myself, you'll have to tell me about it, but you know, something famous, you go anywhere in the world and you see Johnny Walker's, and it used to say down here made in Kilmarnock, but the real reason that it was made in Kilmarnock, I'll give you a bit of history. Johnny Walker's obviously the brand of Scottish whisky now owned by Diageo. The brand first established by grocer John Walker, it is the most widely distributed brand of blended Scottish whisky in the world. So it's a blend, it's a mixture of everything coming together. It's sold in almost every country with annual sales of the equivalent of over £223.7 million. 700 millilitre bottles in, 223 million 700 millilitre bottles, okay, were sold in 2016, which is over 156 million litres of whisky. When John Walker, born on the 25th of July 1805, lost his farmer father, the family sold the farm and their trustees invested the proceeds, which was £417, it's about 600, just under $600 just now, in an Italian warehouse, grocery and wine and spirit shop on the High Street in Kilmarnock, Ayrshire, Scotland. Walker managed the grocery, wine and spirit segment as a teenager in 1820. The Excise Act of 1823 relaxed strict laws on distillation of whisky and reduced by a considerable amount the extreme heavy taxes on the distillation and sale of whisky. By 1825, Walker, who was a teetotaler, who never drank, was selling spirits including rum, brandy, gin and whisky. Myself, I don't drink the whisky, but I've got shares in Diageo, so there you go. That's what you call hypocrisy. In short order, he switched to dealing mainly in whisky. Since blending of grain and malt whiskies was still banned, he was selling both blended malt whiskies and grain whiskies. They were sold and made to order whiskies blended to meet specific customer requirements. Because he did not have any brand of his own, he began using his name on labels years later, selling a blended malt as Walker's Kilmarnock Whisky. John Walker died in 1859. So, just shows you where you start from, and it's usually started from something going wrong, which is the farm, you know, and you turn out to have a business like Johnny Walker's. Going back to Johnny Walker's, I'm sure the man would have drank enough whisky. Whether it would have been Walker's or not, I don't know. But this is Robert Burns, the famous Scottish poet. Burns is kind of close to my heart because I always went around doing a bit of poetry when I was younger. Every kid at school we got taught Burns poetry. But the one that's really from myself is there's always drunkenness with Robert Burns. There's always something, and the Tam O'Shanter, the famous poem, is he's leaving the bar one night in Ayr from the market, and he's going through and to get home on his horse, and his trusty Meg, his horse, would always take him home. Didn't matter how sheets to the wind he was. But this night he decided to go through a shortcut through the graveyard. And as he was going through the graveyard, he could hear music in the church. So he looked inside, and there was the devil dancing with all these people. Now, this is actually it's a huge poem, and I remember about 2 verses of it. But what happens then, and he's drunk, and he's sitting watching, and he's thinking, and he's just so happy, and he wants to shout. And he leans in, and he shouts, "Well done, Cutty Sack," which means, well done, the woman in the short dress. And once he's shouted this out, he realises that everything stops and the devil turns round to look at him. So he's jumping on his horse, he's obviously still drunk, and this horse takes off. Now, in the history of Scotland, the devil can't chase you over a burn, it can't jump over a river. So he's going on and he's telling him, "Come on, mate, get in the trying to go home." And just as that, one of the devils, the devils, I forget her name, but she reaches out just as he jumps over, the horse jumps over, and it grabs her tail, and she pulls the tail off of the horse. But luckily, Tam O'Shanter gets away to live another day. But yeah, it's great listening to that. If you ever get a chance to listen to that to music, as an orchestra does it, I forget who it is, but it's really good because you're the tenseness of the orchestra and you will get to the burn. But you know, so again, Robert Burns very famous for Auld Lang Syne. That's probably one of his most famous songs.
How about Red Red Rose?
Red Red Rose, another lovely one.
I got to sing that at my oldest daughter's wedding.
There you go.
She married a fellow whose name is Erdman, and they had him in their Scottish
Celtic regalia. Yeah. So Robert Burns is celebrated every January. The 23rd of January is his birthday, and I'm a member of the Scots of the Hill Country organisation, and again, carrying that with you, some of the poems and the stories of this man who was a rogue. He was a woman's man. He really was, and he also was a famous a mason. He was a famous mason of the Scottish Rite. He used to go to the lodge in Turbolton. It just shows you how far about and how widespread it is. But you know, great poet, and as I said, it's really, really close. So Kilmarnock was where he did a lot of his publishing. He stayed a little bit further south in Ayr. He was born down in Ayr, and really that was his trotting ground until he died, I believe, of tuberculosis for all that cold weather. So again, I've done his history here without even. So Robert Burns was regarded as a pioneer of the Romantic movement, and after his death he became a great source of inspiration to the founder of both liberalism and socialism, and a cultural icon of Scotland among the Scottish diaspora around the world. Celebration of life and work became almost a national cult during the 18th and 20th century, and his influence has been strong in Scottish literature. One of the things that I do for the Scots of the Hill Country is I make the haggis every year for them, okay? Now, this haggis, obviously, there's certain things you can and you can't do in the US, so this haggis gets tweaked, and I've been given awards for this haggis. I do enjoy it, but the haggis is originally the sheep's pluck, which is the sheep. They take out the heart, the liver and the lungs, keep the tube in and throw it into the boiling water, grind it up, almost like machitas, almost like that, but they grind it up with oatmeal. And when you used to go to the butcher when I was a child in Scotland, your mother would buy, a piece of meat if it was a good month, or if we, had a bit of money, and the haggis was there, and you would almost be given a haggis for free. Now they're about 15, 20 pounds, and all the fancy restaurants are stuffing chicken with the stuff, and the cost of haggis now, and remember, that was poor man's food. That was the first thing that would be utilised. Again, royal haggis was done by the deer pluck, but nobody had any deer in Scotland. They were all owned by the nobody and people like that. So again, sheep's stomach, put it all in and steam it, and beautiful. I really enjoy it, but again, it needs a splash of whiskey in it as well. To wash it down indeed. So again, Robert Burns, moving on to another famous person from right next to Kilmarnock, Alexander Fleming. Does anybody know what Alexander Fleming's famous for? Do you know? Nearly.
Did he make serum, medical serum?
He did, but specifically he was the man who found penicillin.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, penicillin. So, told it was, yes, by accident, and then you read into it. So, one day he was looking for, they found that. So, first of all, Alexander Fleming, Kilmarnock stayed in a little town called Darvel. Now, Darvel was called Darvel by Queen Victoria. She was driving through there one day. She wasn't driving, but sure somebody was driving her anyway. And she called it, she looked out and she said, this place has a dark veil over the top of it, so that's why it was called Darvel. He was originally from New Mills in Darvel, it's only 6 miles from Kilmarnock. He studied at Kilmarnock Academy, and the one thing about Kilmarnock Academy that we caught in this history was it's one of the only places in the world that has 2 Nobel Poet Laureates from the same school. One was him, obviously, for penicillin, and I think the other was one of the Boyds. It was, I'll come back to that, I can't be sure of my lie, but I'm sure it's one of the Boyds, who'd done a lot for nutrition. But again, penicillin, one day he came back in, they knew that there was something going on with mold spores, and one of his dishes had been left open, and a mold spore came in, and he had some kind of bacteria in there, and it showed that roundabout, the circle roundabout where this mold spore was, the bacteria could not survive, it wouldn't come into it. Now, they believe that without this man's work or what he found, the death toll in the world wars would have been about 3 times worse, because where people were dying was more from shrapnel wounds and wounds in the legs and obviously infection, and that's what penicillin did. So he found the initial spores, but it wasn't until it went to another 3 universities and actually a woman was able to separate it out that they found that they actually were able to reproduce the serum. It's one thing finding it in a jar, it's another thing making it into a viable medicine. And still today, it's one of the top antibiotics. So, Sir Alex Fleming, he was born on the 6th of August 1881, was a Scottish biologist, physicist, microbiologist and pharmacologist. His best known discoveries are the enzyme penicillin in 1923 and the world's first antibiotic substance, which was benzyl penicillin, penicillin G, in 1928, for which he shared the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 1947 with Howard Florey. He wrote many articles on bacteria immunology and also chemotherapy. Fleming was knighted for his scientific achievements in 1944. In 1999, he was named in Time magazine's list of the 100 most important people of the 20th century. In 2002, he was chosen the BBC's television poll for determining the 100 greatest Britons. He was only just behind Robert Burns and William Wallace, who we've already covered. So, again, really, I just kept on to this one, and this was a surprise for me at the end. This was the famous Scots-Americans, okay? Now, if we can just have Elvis Presley and John Wayne, that's enough for me. What more do you want, So you've got Elvis Presley, Jennifer Aniston, well, she's still looking good for about 105, I think she is now. So, Andrew Carnegie, who was known as that he never had much money, the man, Johnny Cash, yeah, absolutely superb. Ronald Reagan, yeah, Neil Armstrong, Woodrow Wilson, and Theodore Roosevelt. So, for Scottish people who have got a population now of about 5.66 million, we did well. It's always been known, and it was a man that told me this, I forget where it was, but he said to me, us Scottish people were like a good red wine, we travel well. And that really brings me to the end of this. I know I was trying to, I will just jump into here quickly. So the connection with Scotland, the Scottish Texans, okay? So Scots came to Texas as individuals and very small groups of families, not as colonists, okay? We've discussed why we came here, because it was particularly bad over there. It's kind of like myself, why did the Meloys come to Scotland? Well, there was a thing called the potato famine. The potato famine didn't actually exist. There wasn't very many potatoes because of blight, but the fact was the English had stopped the boats getting into the island, which gave us food. So don't let them tell you it was a big famine, that's why people died. It was meant to happen. And as you can see, it's still underlying the currents with Ireland nowadays, with Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland and Brexit and the English people. You get this. I mean, if anybody's English, Mrs. English, I know your name's English in England at the end, but don't worry about that. It's, when you see it from my point of view, it all turns round. We own 3/4 of the world. This is the way you'll do it. This is now all turning completely on its head, 180 degrees, because Scotland got the chance to become independent. It never took that chance, but it was not taking that chance due to fear-mongering among the elderly in Scotland. They were told they wouldn't get their pensions. They were told they couldn't spend their pensions because they wouldn't have the pound. Now remember, the first thing about you can't use the pound sterling was the fact that the Scottish people went, that's fine. If we cannot use the pound sterling, then you keep the 2 trillion of debt that you have. So that's when they went, oh no, you can use. But again, fear-mongering stopped the Scottish people by 5%. No nation or country in the world has been given the opportunity to become independent and not taken it. So that just shows you, again, the poem from Robert Burns, a parcel of rogues in a nation, sold for Scottish gold. You know, that kind of same thing again, and I don't want to get started on it. But this Brexit thing is turning all that back on the head, because what we're seeing is the English and English Parliament, who, remember, it doesn't matter what Scotland does. It can vote all day long and everybody can vote together. There's something like 30 MPs and there's 280 down in England. So it's even structured so that there's no way that Scotland could vote its way out of it. But from the Brexit point of view, it's just shown that it's about power down in that one house down there. And it's to keep it, and what they're doing is they're starting to fight internally. The rest of the world, I know you have got your own issues over in the USA, which is a great thing because it's keeping you off watching what a disaster of implosion from, remember, owning 3/4 of the world to not being able to see that you're actually better as a union than what you are not. So I'll leave it at that because I could go on all day long. Some of the first Scots in Texas were explorers, map makers and naturalists. William Dunbar and Thomas Drummond were both naturalists commissioned to report on the Texas area. Dunbar was chosen by US President Thomas Jefferson in 1805 for exploration as political and scientific. Drummond reported to the University of Glasgow. Another thing Scotland's very famous for is its education and its education system. Strathclyde University, Glasgow University, Dundee for medicine. Remember, the reason for that is back in the 1700s, there was almost a percentage, I believe, of about 35% of Scotland was literate at the same time when only 12% of England and London was literate. And that was because of the church. The Presbyterian church, at the back of every church, there was a school, and you went to school until you were 14. So that just shows you how important education is to society, and even at that start. Later Scots came to Texas as families and developers. Neil McClelland from the Isle of Skye, way up there, after stops in North Carolina and Florida, arrived on the coast of Texas with a group of friends and family and their own 3-mast schooner. And you can see why they wouldn't stop in Florida and Carolinas, and they would find Texas and went, you know what, Texas looks good to me. Moving inland, they suffered Indian attacks in Robertson's colony in 1838. McClellan continued on with his family to become an early settler on the Brazos River near present-day Waco. McLennan country bears his name. Many of the Clan Cameron found Texas exciting enough for home. Among them was John Cameron, who came to Texas in 1827, bought land, and by 1835 was a secretary in the state government at Monclova. But he allied himself with the revolutionaries and joined the siege of Bexar. Ewan Cameron arrived during the Texas Revolution, enlisted in the army, and later received land warrants which he claimed in San Patricio County. There he participated in frontier defence vigorously enough to earn the name Bruce of the West, from the Robert the Bruce. Later at the Battle of Maya, when Texas forces were captured by Mexican troops, Cameron fought with rocks because he could not reload fast enough. As a prisoner in 1843, he was elected commander by the Texans when they were forced to draw black and white beans to determine who would be executed. Cameron drew a white bean, giving him the choice of life, a choice he could not take. He was shot after he attempted to escape. Not all Scots were remembered as warriors. William Cameron, who did serve in the Civil War, was a lumberyard owner in Dallas and Denison. Again, the Scots in the 1880s, a number of Scots stonecutters, stonemasons were contracted to make the journey to Texas as a group. Texas granite had been chosen for much of the new state capital design, and Texas granite and native Scots brought experience with the hard stone, again going back to the granite and the curving stones. Originally hired as strike breakers themselves, the Scots faced other labour disputes while on the capital job, but they cut and finished much of the stone for the present building. A few stayed in Texas and added their skills to later construction projects. From 1890 to 1936, the Matador Land and Cattle Company, operating in the Panhandle and backed with Scottish money, was led by manager Murdo Mackenzie. The Matador herd at 70,000 at its peak, that's a lot of cattle, was long regarded as one of the best in the United States. Beginning just before the start of the 20th century, Texas Scots organised by 1890 the Universal Order of Scottish Clans had a few lodges in Texas and was well established several decades later. The Scottish Society of Texas, dating from 1963, with a representative of more than 50 clans, holds annual Highland Games and gathering of the clans and has often held competition field events, piping and dancing in several cities. So, that comes to the end of, hopefully it was a bit of an information from you. Thank you everybody for letting me speak, and again we'll leave it again with John Wayne was Scottish. What more can I say?
I love it.